I am presenting biographical information about Reverend Dr. Art Lindsley. Narnia and C.S. Lewis, Reason, Imagination, and You. An excerpt from that sermon, and I will close with a personal response. Let me begin with a brief biography and historical background written by the C.S. Lewis Institute. Reverend Dr. Art Lindsley is the Vice President of the Theological Initiatives at the Institute for Faith, Work, and Economics, where he oversees development of theology that integrates faith, work, and economics. He has also been Senior Fellow at the C.S. Lewis Institute since 1987. Prior to that, he was the Director of the Educational Ministries at the Lingen Valley Study Center and Staff Specialist with the Coalition for Christian Outreach in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He is the author of C.S. Lewis's Case for Christ, True Truth, Love, The Ultimate Apologetic, and co-author with R.C. Sproul and John Grinster of Classical Apologetics, and has written numerous articles on theology, apologetics, C.S. Lewis, and the lives and works of many other authors and teachers. Reverend Dr. Art Lindsley received his B.S. in chemistry from Seattle Pacific University and MDiv from Pittsburgh Theological Seminary, and Ph.D. in religious studies from the University of Pittsburgh. Reverend Dr. Lindsley, his wife Connie, and their two boys, Trey and Jonathan, make their home in Arlington, Virginia. I will now present my excerpt chosen from his sermon. Reverend Dr. Art Lindsley focuses on the idea of the inner ring and presents it with descriptions and writings given from C.S. Lewis. He first gives a picture of Susan, and she is not with them in Narnia, in the tales that are in Narnia, but she is back on Earth. Susan has ceased to be a Narnian because she wants to be grown up. I'm sorry. Okay. She says, well, that's what they used to talk about when they were children. And she wants to be accepted in the inner ring of the adults. Followed by that character, he gives a description of a character from The Hideous Strength, the third in the Space Trilogy. His name is Mark Sedok. He is the anti-hero in the story and sets out to be part of the inner ring of the scientists. But these scientists are known as the evil group, and he really wants to be inside this inner ring with them, but they're obviously not beneficial for him. So this shows a great temptation that people have to face when they desire to be accepted or to be close to power or even in a position of power. So next he shares the wisdom of C.S. Lewis from his essay, The Inner Ring. There is always, throughout life, those who are out and those who are in. We spend a lot of our lives really trying to be in a group which we choose. Though this is not necessarily a bad thing to be in the inner ring, but the desire to be in the inner ring is very corrupting. So he points out that some of the people think that they are in when they are out, and some people think that they are out when they are in. I believe that in men's lives, at certain periods, and in many men's lives at all periods, between infancy and old age, one of the most dominant elements is the desire to be inside the local ring and the terror of being left outside. Again, this is not necessarily evil, but the desire which draws us into the ring is another matter. This may cause you to do or say something in which you may later regret and cause you shame. So if you do nothing about it, if you drift with the stream, you will in fact be an inner ringer. I don't say you will be a successful one, that's as may be, but rather by ponding and moping outside rings that you may never enter, or by passing triumphantly further and further in one way or the other, you will be that kind of man. And when compromise comes, it won't come in any particular dramatic colors. It will come, say, in the business or political office. In other words, they will say, we always have to do this. And you will be drawn in, and not by the desire for gain and ease, but simply by the moment when the cup was near your lips. You cannot bear to be thrown back again into the cold outer world. It would be so terrible to see that other men or woman's face, that genial, confidential, delightful, sophisticated face, turn suddenly cold and pretentious, to know that you'd been tried for the inner ring and rejected. So C.S. Lewis gives imagery of a woman ready to accept you, yet turning away. Of all the passions, this passion for the inner ring is the most skillful in making one that is not very bad do very bad things. The torture allotted to the Danaids in the classical underworld, a symbol not one vice, but of all vices. It is the very mark of prospective desire that seeks what is not to be had. The desire to be inside the invisible line illustrates this rule. As long as you are governed by that desire, you will never get what you want. You're trying to peel an onion. If you succeed, there will be nothing left. Until you conquer the fear of being an outsider, you will remain. So once again, C.S. Lewis is using imagery. The image of an onion. When you get down to the core of it, what is there? Nothing. That satisfaction of being in the inner ring is not what you thought it would be. Finally, Dr. Art Lindsley concludes with the way that a Christian should respond to this issue of the inner ring, with an excerpt taken from an essay, The Reflections of the Psalms. I am inclined to think that Christians would be wise to avoid, where he decently can, any meetings with people that are bullies, that are vicious, cruel, dishonest, spiteful, and so forth. Not because we are too good for them, but in a sense because we are not good enough. We are not good enough to cope with all the temptation, nor clever enough to deal with all the problems, which an evening spent in such society produces. The temptation is to condone, to canny that. But in other words, looks and laughter to consent to something in which we don't really agree with. Lead us not into temptation, but often means among other things, deny me those gratifying invitations, those highly intersecting contacts, that participation in the brilliant movements of our age, which I so often at such risk desire. Not that we may not be called so, but beware of it, and much better to focus somewhere else, rather than on getting close to that position of power. The quest for the inner ring will break your hearts unless you break it. But if you break it, a surprising result will follow. If in your working hours you make your work your end, you will presently find yourself all unaware inside the only circle that really matters. That is, doing good work and being satisfied with it. Seek first his kingdom, and all things will be added. Lewis states it beautifully using images. They are clear to be both to your reason and your imagination. Not only good writings, but they are also images associated with it. This makes it so clear that you cannot miss the point. So finally, I would like to close with a personal response. It's very easy to get caught up in this idea of wanting to be in the inner ring. Oftentimes, being a high school student or even a college student, we are seeking to discover who we really are. I know for me personally, changing a school, I've had the ability to recreate my identity to people who don't know me. And I think that this is not something that we are going to stop struggling with once we get to college and we make it out and we're in the business world, but it's something that we're going to struggle with for the rest of our life. So Lindsley presents Lewis's ideas, and he says that Lewis presents these successfully because he uses images. Now you're able to relate to it because you can picture, oh yeah, if I peel away an onion, there's nothing left. And in the same way, if we're working on trying to fit in and get so caught up in that, we lose the fact that we're not even following our core values. And one thing that I thought was really interesting that Lewis said was that when you get inside the circle, you think sometimes you're in there and sometimes you're not, but you sometimes complicate and take away your true values because you want to please these people, and you get caught up in the idea of power. Well, that's not what Christ asks us to do. Christ asks us to share his love with people, not to be inside the inner ring just so that we can relate to these people. This is not our world. We have something better. So I would like to close with this inspiring quote that I found myself from C.S. Lewis, and it says, I find myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy. The most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. So us getting all caught up in trying to be in this inner ring is not necessary, because it's true. As C.S. Lewis says, we were made for another world.